So as the Oklahoma Sooners are preparing for their move from the Big 12 to the SEC, today we need to dive into a position group for the Sooners that could be massive for their transition, a position group that could help this offense be dangerous. And of course, today we're highlighting and breaking down the wide receivers for the Oklahoma Sooners. But before we can, as always, y'all know the drill. I've got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments. Give me a Y for yes, N for no. Are you excited about the wide receivers Oklahoma will field this year? And let me know what you're thinking. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification. I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and comment down below. Those interactions really do seem small, but they are massive to content creators such as myself, and both getting picked up and maintained by the YouTube algorithm. But having said all that, let's just jump right into this. And where do we begin? Whenever we're talking about the Oklahoma Sooners wide receiver room, it's interesting to think back a year, where a year ago we were talking about this room, but we were asking questions. We knew that there were talented prospects in the room, but you just had a lack of production. The question was, who are going to be the names to emerge to take over the wide receiver room that had just gone to the NFL? Well, fast forward a year, and now the Oklahoma wide receiver room is no longer a question. It is an answer. When you look top to bottom, there are a lot of names to be excited about. Both young guys who are freshmen, guys who came last year and are going into their sophomore season, and certainly guys that were able to get some production this past season. And one thing we need to acknowledge anytime we're talking about Oklahoma recruiting is the work they've done in the transfer portal under Brent Venables, where Brent Venables continues to pull in top talent via the transfer portal, and it's been something that has been massively impactful for the Sooners. When we go back a year ago, they were able to get Andrell Anthony from the transfer portal, someone who was massively beneficial for this Oklahoma offense. Fast forward to now, we're having that same conversation about Deion Burks. Could this be a guy to come in here and have that same type impact Andrell Anthony had? Oklahoma fans certainly hope so, and he certainly has the ability. Whenever we look at Deion Burks, he's coming off of a season where he had 47 receptions, 629 yards, and 7 touchdowns. So he was able to get active, and whenever you look at him in combination with some of the names you already know were productive for the Sooners, this is where it gets exciting. Now, yes, look, there are questions for Oklahoma. What's the offensive line going to look like? We've talked about that, though. And one of the things I always lean on is if you have an offensive line that has questions, you better hope you have an offensive line coach that is usually great at answering questions. Luckily for Oklahoma, you have Bill Bedenbaugh. He has been phenomenal at providing answers time and time again, and is genuinely one of the best in the business at developing offensive linemen and sending them to the NFL where they have successful NFL careers. So though you may have that question about the Oklahoma offensive line, you do feel good at the end of the day that Bill Bedenbaugh is the one overseeing this transition. We can talk about the quarterback, where Jackson Arnold is now taking over for Dylan Gabriel. But once again, Jackson Arnold is a former 5-star. He has got real high upside, and now he has an entire offseason preparing to be the guy. That's much different than preparing to be a guy. There is a distinct difference there. Jackson Arnold knows now that he is the one that will be leading this offense, and his preparation will reflect that. I'm excited to see what he's able to do, but we also must remember I was able to watch him play in high school a ton. Being that I live in Denton, I know he is an impressive young man. He has got a ton of ability, and it's going to be exciting to see what he's able to do. But if you're excited about Jackson Arnold, you must be excited about this wide receiver room. We talked about Deion Burks coming in from the transfer portal. How about we talk about the transfer portal addition they got last year? Andrell Anthony, who unfortunately sustained an injury, but before that injury was on pace to put up monster numbers. Before the injury, he had 27 receptions for 429 yards, 1 touchdown, and was averaging 15.9 per. If you think that's impressive, how about Jaden Gibson and Nick Anderson? Jaden Gibson had 14 receptions, 375 yards, but had a 26.8 average yards per reception and 5 touchdowns. We go down to Nick Anderson, 38 receptions, 798 yards, 21 average yards per reception, and 10 touchdowns. The Oklahoma Sooners are returning a lot of explosive talent in the wide receiver department. Yes, Drake Stoops moves on, and he was a wizard in the slot for the Sooners. Really a tricky player to account for and cover. But luckily, you can add in a Deion Burks to go along with a Jaden Gibson and Nick Anderson and Andrell Anthony. Not only is that a lot of explosiveness for teams to deal with, that's a lot of size for teams to deal with. Andrell Anthony is not a small guy, and Jaden Gibson and Nick Anderson are certainly not small individuals. They are big frame wide receivers that are instant mismatches in the red zone, but they're not diminishing any of the explosive athleticism that some may think wide receivers of their frame may have. No, these guys are uber athletic individuals, and Oklahoma is going to look to exploit that. They have got multiple different options in the wide receiver room that should help this offense find success, to be able to find consistency. Because one of the things we also talk about whenever we break down wide receiver rooms are stylistic differences that may be present in that wide receiver room. And that's why I highlighted the size of Nick Anderson, the size of Jaden Gibson, because these are big body wide receivers that when you get down into the red zone, they're instant mismatches. It's going to be very hard to account for both of those towers out there, especially when there's a Deion Burks on the field and an Andrell Anthony. At that point, defensive backs are going to have a real task in front of them. How are you going to stop this? And if Oklahoma's offensive line comes together, if Jackson Arnold develops into the quarterback so many think he could be, this is going to be an insanely fun offense to watch, and I'm really excited to see what they're able to do. But we're having this conversation about the guys that are known. Just know in the background, there are several really exciting players that could push for playing time and nobody would bat an eyelash. I've made it no secret that one of my favorite additions last year for Oklahoma was Jaquez Petaway. I think this guy has got a different type of ability when he gets the ball in his hands. Could he break through? Could he become a real productive member of this wide receiving corps? There's no reason why he couldn't. He's got all the ability in the world. But luckily, for Oklahoma fans, you have a good problem. You have a lot of returning production in Andrell Anthony, and Jaden Gibson, and Nick Anderson, and Deion Burks is not a new college football player. Yes, this environment will be new for him, but this is what we always talk about with the transfer portal. It affords you something that you're just quite frankly not afforded in high school football recruiting. The ability to know this is a guy that has successfully made the transition from high school football to college football. And ladies and gentlemen, that is a massive transition, a transition that is much harder than we often talk about. The transfer portal affords you the opportunity to get a guy like Deion Burks, where you don't have that question. You know he has successfully made this transition. Now it's just about integrating him into the room, getting him familiar with the quarterback, with the other wide receivers, with the offensive coordinator, and certainly Emmett Jones. And that's where we're going to end the video. Because Oklahoma has an asset on this coaching tree that I don't think gets enough praise. Not saying from Oklahoma fans, I mean from a national perspective. Emmett Jones was a home run hire for Brent Venables and the Oklahoma Sooners. He is somebody that if I was a decision maker for the Sooners, I would be doing whatever possible to ensure he's with us for the long haul. Because he is a difference maker. Point blank, period. Both in terms of recruiting, how he's able to relate to these kids, how he's able to cultivate successful relationships, which are massive in being able to win recruiting battles, and certainly how he's able to work with these wide receivers, and you can see how his coaching has affected some of these guys. Andrell Anthony was someone who was always talented. You knew he was talented, but he hit a different level to his game under Emmett Jones, and I'm excited to see what the rest of this wide receiver room will look like after having worked with Emmett Jones for a longer period of time, and in the case of Deion Burks, after having worked with Emmett Jones. So this is a conversation we're going to continue having as we get more answers about the Oklahoma offensive line, as we get more answers about the quarterback Jackson Arnold is developing into. We will circle back to this conversation, but if you are an Oklahoma fan, I will say this. You've got a great problem where you have got a lot of wide receiver talent, and it's going to be a ton of fun to see who emerges as the guy. But that's where I need your help. Hop down to the comments. Let me know the names you're most excited about. That's it. See ya.